I want to start with an uncomfortable claim, and then spend the rest of this video proving it to you. The healthiest relationship you will ever be in will probably feel, at times, boring. Not empty, not lifeless. Boring, in the specific sense that it will lack the chaos, the uncertainty, and the emotional whiplash that most of us have been quietly trained to associate with real passion. If that sentence makes you a little uneasy, good, because that unease is exactly the thing we're going to unpack today, and understanding it might be the single most important shift you ever make in how you choose a partner. Here is where this starts. From an extremely young age, most of us absorb our template for what love is supposed to feel like from sources that have almost nothing to do with actual healthy relationships. Movies where love is inseparable from obstacles. Songs where longing and heartbreak are treated as the most romantic possible emotional states. Stories where the relationship worth rooting for is always the one with the most conflict, the most uncertainty, the most will. They won't. They tension. By the time we're adults, many of us have an internal definition of passion that is functionally identical to instability. Highs and lows, chasing and being chased. The stomach drop feeling of not being sure where you stand. We call this chemistry. Very often, what we're actually describing is a nervous system responding to unpredictability, not to genuine compatibility or safety. This distinction matters enormously because unpredictability and genuine emotional intensity produce almost identical physiological sensations in the body. Elevated heart rate, a kind of electric alertness. The sense that this person occupies more of your mental space than anyone has in a long time. Your body cannot easily tell the difference between the excitement of falling for someone truly compatible and the anxious hypervigilance of trying to figure out where you stand with someone inconsistent. Both produce activation, both feel in the moment, like being alive in a way that ordinary life doesn't. This is precisely why so many people, without realizing it, become quietly addicted to the wrong kind of intensity and start to experience genuinely healthy, secure connection as flat by comparison, simply because it isn't generating that same physiological spike. So let's talk about what a genuinely emotionally healthy relationship actually looks like day to day, because it is almost the opposite of what most relationship media has trained us to expect. And once you see the actual list, you'll understand exactly why it can feel underwhelming to a nervous system calibrated toward chaos. In a secure, healthy relationship, you generally know where you stand. There isn't a constant undercurrent of wondering whether the other person is truly invested, whether today is the day they pull away, whether a minor disagreement is secretly a sign the whole thing is ending. This certainty, which sounds like it should feel wonderful, can initially register as strange or even suspicious to someone who has spent years associating uncertainty with romantic intensity. The absence of anxiety can feel disorientingly like the absence of feeling at all. In a healthy relationship, conflict tends to be resolved rather than repeated. Disagreements happen because they happen in every relationship between two real people, but they don't escalate into identity level arguments about whether the relationship itself is viable. They get discussed, sometimes clumsily, and then they actually end rather than resurfacing in slightly different forms every few weeks as unresolved resentment. This can feel, again counterintuitively, less dramatic and therefore less significant than relationships, where every fight feels like a referendum on the entire relationship's survival. But that lack of drama is not a lack of depth. It is the actual mechanism of depth, because unresolved conflict doesn't deepen intimacy. It erodes it slowly while masquerading as passion. In a healthy relationship, affection is consistent rather than intermittent. You are not left guessing which version of your partner will show up today, the warm one or the withdrawn one. This consistency, again, can initially feel less exciting than a dynamic where affection has to be earned or won back after periods of coldness. Because intermittent reinforcement, receiving a reward unpredictably rather than reliably, is one of the most powerful psychological mechanisms there is for creating obsessive attachment. It is not coincidentally the exact mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. A partner who is warm 90% of the time and cold 10% of the time will often generate more anxious preoccupation and more obsessive thinking than a partner who is warm consistently. Precisely because the unpredictability keeps your nervous system chasing the next reward instead of resting in a reliable one. What feels like deeper passion is very often just a more effective addiction mechanism. And mistaking the two is one of the most common and costly errors people make in choosing partners. In a healthy relationship, you can express a need without it becoming a catastrophe. You can say, "I'd like a bit more communication when you are traveling," or "I felt hurt when that happened," without the conversation spiraling into defensiveness, punishment, or days of tension. This is perhaps the single clearest marker of emotional health in a relationship, and it is also one of the least glamorous because it looks like ordinary, mildly uncomfortable adult conversation rather than a dramatic emotional confrontation that ends in tearful reconciliation. Ordinary conversation doesn't make for a good story to tell your friends, but it is functionally what actually holding a relationship together over decades is built from. Now, here is the part that ties this all together and explains why this matters so much for how you evaluate the relationships in front of you right now. If your primary emotional experience of love has, up to this point, been shaped by unpredictability, whether through inconsistent caregiving in childhood, past relationships defined by anxious uncertainty, or simply the cultural narratives we've all absorbed, your nervous system has likely built an association between love and activation rather than between love and safety. Which means when you actually encounter a secure, consistent, low-drama relationship, it can genuinely register at first as underwhelming. Not because something is wrong with the relationship, because something is unfamiliar to your nervous system, and unfamiliar safety often gets misread as absence of feeling, simply because it doesn't generate the same physiological signature that instability does. This creates a genuinely dangerous pattern if it goes unrecognized, because it leads people to repeatedly choose the unstable option, interpreting the anxiety it generates as evidence of deeper compatibility, while walking away from stable, available partners, interpreting the calm they generate as evidence of insufficient chemistry. Over enough repetitions, this pattern can become a person's entire romantic history, a long series of intense, chaotic relationships that all eventually collapse, punctuated by brief encounters with calmer, more available people who get dismissed as boring before anything has a real chance to develop. So what do you actually do with this? First, get honest about your own physiological response to consistency versus unpredictability. The next time you meet someone who is reliably warm, communicative, and low drama, and you notice a flicker of something like disinterest or boredom, don't automatically trust that feeling as objective information about the relationship's quality. Treat it as data about your own nervous system's calibration instead, and ask yourself honestly whether the feeling is actually about the person or about the unfamiliar sensation of not being kept slightly off balance second. Learn to distinguish genuine compatibility from chemistry built on chaos by paying attention to how you feel after time with someone, not just during it. Chaotic relationships often produce intense highs in the moment, followed by anxiety, exhaustion, or a subtle sense of depletion afterward. Genuinely healthy connection tends to produce something quieter but more sustainable, a sense of being more yourself after time with the person, rather than more anxious or more preoccupied trying to interpret their behavior. Third, give calm relationships more time than your instincts want to give them before writing them off. Because the excitement generated by unpredictability is front-loaded, chaotic relationships often feel more compelling in the first weeks than secure ones do. But genuine depth in a healthy relationship tends to build slowly through accumulated trust and consistency, rather than arriving immediately as a spike of intensity. If you consistently exit calm, healthy dynamics within the first few weeks, because they don't generate an immediate high, you may be systematically eliminating the exact kind of relationship that would actually work long-term before it ever gets the chance to reveal its own quieter form of depth. The uncomfortable truth underneath all of this is that many of us have to consciously relearn what safety feels like. Because our nervous systems were shaped by environments, romantic or otherwise, that trained us to associate love with vigilance rather than rest. That relearning is not instant, and it is not always comfortable, because calm can genuinely feel foreign for a while before it starts to feel like relief. But the relationships that actually last, the ones people build entire lives on top of, are almost always the boring ones. In exactly the sense we've been describing: reliable, undramatic, quietly, consistently there. I want to go a bit deeper into the mechanism behind intermittent reinforcement, because understanding it precisely changes how convincingly it operates on you once you can actually see it happening. This concept comes originally from behavioral psychology research on how reward schedules affect motivation and attachment to a behavior. A reward given every single time a behavior occurs creates a certain predictable level of engagement, which is satisfying but not especially compelling once the novelty wears off. A reward given unpredictably, sometimes present, sometimes withheld, with no clear pattern governing which is which, creates a far more powerful and persistent engagement. Because the uncertainty itself keeps the reward-seeking system activated in a way that consistency never does. This is precisely the mechanism that makes gambling so difficult to walk away from, even when someone is losing money overall. And it is precisely the mechanism operating when a partner's affection is inconsistent rather than reliable. The withheld affection isn't just neutral in those moments, it actively strengthens your engagement with the relationship as a whole, because your system is now oriented around anticipating the next reward rather than resting in a reliable one. This has a specific and somewhat unsettling implication worth naming directly. A person can be genuinely, sincerely fond of a partner who treats them inconsistently and still find themselves more obsessively preoccupied with that inconsistent partner than with someone who treats them consistently well, purely because of this reward mechanism, entirely separate from actual compatibility or long-term potential. This means the intensity of your preoccupation with someone is not on its own reliable evidence of how good the relationship actually is for you. It might simply be evidence of how effectively their inconsistency has activated a reward-seeking loop in your nervous system, which is a genuinely different thing, and confusing the two is one of the most common reasons people stay far longer than is good for them in relationships that are objectively unstable. Let's also talk about the specific practical texture of what secure relationships tend to sound like in conversation, because this is another place where the theory becomes much more useful once it is made concrete. In a securely attached couple, disagreements about logistics, whose turn it is to handle something, how to spend a weekend, tend to stay logistics, resolved through ordinary negotiation rather than escalating into referendums on whether the relationship itself is fundamentally sound. Compliments and appreciation get expressed with some regularity, not performatively or excessively, but as a normal part of daily interaction, rather than something that has to be extracted through complaint or absence first. Requests for reassurance when they do happen, because even secure people occasionally want reassurance, get met with warmth, rather than irritation or a sense of being burdened, and they tend to happen relatively rarely precisely, because the baseline level of security in the relationship means reassurance isn't constantly needed in the first place. I also want to address something that often complicates this conversation, which is the role that genuine excitement and passion play in a healthy relationship, because I don't want anything in this video to suggest that secure attachment means dull or passionless. Passion and calm are not actually opposites, even though our culture often frames them that way. Secure relationships absolutely can and often do include real excitement, physical chemistry, shared adventure, moments of genuine intensity. The difference is that this excitement comes from actual shared experience and genuine attraction rather than from anxiety about the relationship's stability. You can have both safety and spark at the same time. And in fact, many people report that once the anxious uncertainty of an unstable dynamic is removed, the genuine chemistry that remains feels more, not less, satisfying, because it isn't tangled up with fear. There is also a specific trap worth naming for anyone who has spent a long time in unstable relationships and is now trying to evaluate a calmer one honestly. The absence of anxiety can initially get misread as the presence of certainty that the relationship will work out, which then creates a strange, secondary anxiety of its own. A fear that because things feel calm, you are somehow missing warning signs you'd normally pick up on through the vigilance that unstable relationships require. This is worth naming explicitly because it can otherwise create a confusing loop where calm relationships generate a kind of anxiety about the absence of anxiety, which some people then misinterpret as evidence that something is being overlooked, rather than simply recognizing it as an unfamiliar and ultimately healthy absence of the hypervigilance they've been used to. One more distinction worth making before we close. because it is genuinely useful when you are trying to evaluate a new relationship in real time rather than only in hindsight. There is a difference between calm that comes from genuine compatibility and calm that comes from simply not investing enough to feel anything at all. Both can look similar on the surface: low drama, few big emotional swings, but they feel very different underneath. Calm rooted in genuine compatibility tends to coexist with real warmth, genuine interest in the other person's life, and a sense of being drawn toward them even in the absence of uncertainty driving that pull. Calm rooted in underinvestment tends to feel more like indifference than peace, a kind of flatness that isn't actually restful, just empty. If you are evaluating whether a calm relationship is secure or simply underinvested, pay attention to whether the calm is accompanied by genuine curiosity and care toward the other person, or whether it is accompanied by a sense of not caring very much either way. The first is what we've been describing throughout this video. The second is a different problem entirely and deserves its own honest examination rather than being mistaken for the secure attachment we've been discussing. It is also worth acknowledging honestly that unlearning this pattern is genuinely difficult, and it is made more difficult by the fact that most of the media, entertainment, and cultural narratives around us continue to reinforce the chaos as passion framing on an ongoing basis. Nearly every popular love story is structured around obstacles, uncertainty, and emotional turbulence, because those elements make for compelling narrative tension in a way that steady, resolved contentment simply doesn't. This means the retraining we've been discussing isn't a one-time realization you have and then move past. It is an ongoing practice of noticing when cultural conditioning is shaping your gut reaction to a relationship and consciously choosing to weigh that reaction against what you actually know intellectually about what secure, sustainable connection tends to look like. Over time, with enough repetition, your gut reactions themselves do start to shift, and calm genuinely starts to feel good rather than merely acceptable. But that shift tends to happen gradually through direct experience of a healthy relationship over months, rather than through insight alone, which is exactly why giving calm connections real time, rather than dismissing them within the first few weeks, matters as much as it does. It is worth adding one final practical distinction here, because it is the one people ask about most once they've absorbed everything else in this video. How do you actually know in the early weeks of something new whether the calm you are feeling is secure compatibility settling in, or simply not enough time having passed for real intensity to build? The honest answer is that you often can't know for certain in week 2 or 3. And that is fine, because the goal was never to force an instant verdict. The goal is to stop using the presence or absence of anxious intensity as your primary evidence either way, and instead pay attention to the things that actually predict long-term compatibility, whether your values align, whether communication stays honest and direct even when it is uncomfortable, whether you both show up consistently over time, and whether the connection continues to feel good specifically after time together, not just charged in the moment. Those markers take a bit longer to observe than a single spike of chemistry does, which is exactly why patience, more than instinct, tends to be the deciding factor in whether someone ends up correctly identifying a genuinely healthy relationship instead of walking past one. One more before we close, because it is the part I most want to stick with you. The version of love that lasts decades, the version people build entire families and shared lives on top of, is very rarely the version that felt most thrilling in the first month. It is almost always the version that felt, at least initially, a little undramatic, a little steady, maybe even a little uncertain in its own quiet way, precisely because it wasn't generating the anxious highs you'd learned to associate with real feeling. Learning to recognize that steadiness as the actual prize, rather than the consolation prize, is one of the more valuable shifts you can make in how you approach every relationship going forward. If this reframed how you think about a relationship you are currently in, or one you walked away from because it felt too calm, I'd genuinely like to hear about it. And if you want the next piece of this puzzle, next week we're breaking down the anxious avoidant trap. Why two specific attachment styles keep finding each other in exactly the chaotic dynamic we just described. Subscribe to Heartnest so you catch it.